In Hoffman, North Carolina, life moves at a slower pace. It's the kind of place where neighbors exchange pleasantries and the hum of cicadas is the loudest sound you'll hear on a summer night. But tonight, this small town would bear witness to a tragedy so devastating, it would leave an indelible mark on its quiet streets. Inside this unassuming home, tension was brewing, a storm waiting to break. For Kenesha Miranda Harrison Neely, a devoted mother and a resilient professional, this night would mark the end of a story filled with love, sacrifice, and unheeded warnings. Neighbors later recalled hearing raised voices, a quarrel that felt unusually tense. In a small town like Hoffman, such noises might stir concern, but rarely action. After all, how often does a heated argument turn into a life-altering tragedy? Then, it happened. A single gunshot shattered the stillness, cutting through the night like a scream that no one could ignore. For one woman, that sound was the end of everything. For this small town, it was the beginning of a nightmare. Within minutes, the street was flooded with emergency lights. Officers rushed toward the house, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that whatever lay beyond that door would haunt them forever. As they entered, a heavy silence greeted them, a silence that seemed to hold its breath, waiting. And then they found it. A scene so grim it would be etched into their memories forever. Kenesha Miranda Harrison Neely, daughter, mother, and friend, was found lifeless, her life stolen by the very man she believed she could save. How did it come to this? What went so terribly wrong, and were the warning signs ignored all along? Today we uncover the life, the love, and the devastating final moments of Kenesha Miranda Harrison Neely, a story of hope, redemption, and the dangerous cost of trusting too deeply. Kenesha Miranda Harrison was born on March 21, 1986 in the heart of Memphis, Tennessee. She was the youngest of 3 siblings, growing up in the working-class neighborhood of Binghamton, a place where the sound of laughter echoed through tight-knit streets, even as families worked hard to make ends meet. From an early age, Kenesha showed a spark of determination. Teachers described her as a bright student who, despite facing challenges at home, had a natural ability to lead and inspire those around her. Her smile lit up every room, but behind it there was a quiet strength, one born from navigating the struggles of a hard-working, blue-collar family. Kenesha's mother was her rock, a woman who worked long hours to keep the family afloat. She instilled in Kenesha the value of perseverance and self-reliance. These lessons became the foundation of Kenesha's character, shaping her into the woman she would later become, a fiercely devoted mother and a hard-working professional. As Kenesha grew older, she developed a dream to create a stable, loving home of her own, one that would provide her children with the kind of warmth and security she sometimes missed. But life rarely follows a perfect script. Her dream of building a family faced its first challenge when she became a single mother. After the sudden departure of her children's father, Kenesha found herself alone, juggling long shifts as a nursing assistant to provide for her daughters. Yet, even in the hardest moments, she never let her struggles define her. For Kenesha, her daughters were her world. She poured every ounce of love into raising them, determined to teach them the same values of strength and resilience that her mother had instilled in her. But beneath her unwavering dedication, there was a lingering void, a longing for companionship and the dream of a partner who could share in her vision of a loving home. Sheldon Maurice Neely, born in 1978, grew up in stark contrast to Kenesha's story. Raised in an environment overshadowed by crime and poverty, Sheldon's childhood was marked by instability. While Kenesha's family fought hard to provide love and guidance, Sheldon often found himself navigating a world that offered few chances for redemption. Sheldon's path was shaped by hardship. With limited support and few opportunities, he fell into a cycle of survival that eventually turned into crime. By his 20s, Sheldon had a rap sheet that included armed robbery, drug trafficking, and violent offenses, charges that led to several stints in prison. For many, his reputation became synonymous with trouble. But despite his dark past, Sheldon had an undeniable charisma. He knew how to charm, how to win people over, a skill that would later become a dangerous weapon in his story with Kenesha. 2 lives, so vastly different, were set on a collision course. Kenesha, a woman striving for love and stability, and Sheldon, a man who carried the weight of his past like an anchor. Their meeting would ignite a connection neither could foresee, one filled with hope, love, and ultimately, heartbreak. What happens when 2 people with such contrasting stories are brought together by love? Can a dark past truly be left behind? or does it inevitably shape the future? In 2019, Kanisha's life took an unexpected turn. After years of focusing solely on her children and her demanding job, she felt a pang of loneliness, a void she rarely acknowledged but couldn't ignore. And then, a message appeared on her screen. His name was Sheldon Maurice Neely. At first it seemed like nothing more than a kind stranger reaching out. His words were warm, his attention constant. For a single mother like Kanisha, who had carried so much alone, it felt like a spark of hope, a chance to rediscover the part of herself that she'd long put aside. Over time, their connection deepened. What started as casual conversations turned into something more. Late at night, after tucking her daughters into bed, Kanisha would find herself eagerly awaiting his messages, and soon their chats moved beyond text to video calls, where she felt a growing sense of familiarity with this man she'd never met in person. Sheldon seemed to understand her struggles. He listened intently, offering encouragement and making her laugh. In his words, she found comfort. In his voice, she heard the promise of a second chance, not just for him, but for her own dreams of companionship and love. But there was something Sheldon hadn't told her. Beneath the charm and gentle words was a truth he couldn't hide forever. A truth that threatened to unravel everything. Sheldon was an inmate, serving time for violent crimes, armed robbery, drug trafficking, and the use of firearms. His past wasn't just troubled, it was dangerous. For most, this revelation would have been a deal-breaker, but for Kanisha, it was a crossroads. She had spent her life believing in resilience, in the possibility of change. Couldn't everyone deserve a second chance? Despite the shock, Kanisha couldn't let go. Sheldon's confession didn't change the way he made her feel. If anything, it deepened her belief that she could help him find redemption. She chose to trust his promises, to believe in his potential to be the man she saw glimpses of in their conversations. Kanisha's belief in Sheldon wasn't just about her. She wanted her daughters to have a father figure, someone who could bring balance to their lives. Slowly, she introduced them to Sheldon over video calls, allowing him to become a part of their family dynamic, even from behind bars. For a while, it seemed like her faith in him was paying off. He connected with her daughters, spoke of plans for their future, and painted a picture of the life they could build together once he was released. It was a dream Kanisha wanted desperately to believe in. But beneath the surface of their blossoming relationship, there were warning signs, subtle comments, moments of frustration, and the looming reality of Sheldon's past began to creep into their conversations. Yet Kanisha, driven by hope, brushed them aside, convinced that love could conquer even the darkest of histories. Was she right to trust him? Could someone with a violent past truly leave it behind? Or was she stepping into a dangerous gamble, one that could cost her far more than she ever imagined? As their bond deepened, Sheldon surprised Kanisha with an unexpected question, one that would change their lives forever. From behind prison walls, he proposed marriage, promising a future where they could finally be together as a family. For Kanisha, the proposal was more than a declaration of love. It was a chance to turn their long-distance connection into a tangible commitment, a step toward building the family life she had always dreamed of. Preparing for a wedding in prison was far from the traditional experience. There were no grand venues, no extravagant plans. Instead, Kanisha focused on the small details, finding a simple dress, writing heartfelt vows, and making sure her daughters felt included in this unusual celebration of love. Kanisha's excitement was palpable. On social media, she shared her joy with friends and family, painting a picture of hope and happiness. But not everyone was supportive. While some congratulated her, others raised concerns about Sheldon's past and the risks of marrying a man still serving time. On December 12, 2023, Kanisha and Sheldon exchanged vows in a small, somber ceremony. It wasn't the fairy tale wedding Kanisha had once imagined, but to her it symbolized the beginning of a new chapter filled with love and hope. Kanisha proudly shared their wedding photos online, framing the moment as one of triumph over adversity. To her, their love was proof that second chances could lead to something beautiful. But behind the smiling posts, cracks were already forming. Their marriage, however, was far from ordinary. For months after the ceremony, their relationship continued as it had before, through letters, video calls, and occasional visits. While Kanisha maintained hope, the reality of their separation began to weigh on her. Every visit brought fleeting moments of happiness, but also a stark reminder of the barriers between them. For Kanisha, the sacrifices she made for their love were worth it. But was Sheldon ready to meet the expectations of a life outside these walls? Her friends and family voiced their concerns, urging her to reconsider. But Kanisha stood firm. To her, Sheldon wasn't defined by his past. He was a man who deserved a fresh start, a partner she believed could finally complete her family. Kanisha's optimism blinded her to the warning signs. While she publicly celebrated her love, others noticed subtle hints of tension. Sheldon's messages sometimes carried an edge of impatience or frustration, a side of him Kanisha wasn't ready to confront. Even as the wedding marked a new beginning, the foundation of their relationship was already being tested by the weight of Sheldon's past and the reality of his present. Kanisha's faith in Sheldon remained steadfast, but doubts began to creep into her mind. Could their love withstand the challenges of his release? Would Sheldon be able to adapt to a life of freedom, responsibility, and family? Could love truly conquer the barriers of a troubled past and a prison sentence? Or was Kanisha's hope a dangerous gamble on a man who might never truly leave his past behind? In late 2022, Sheldon Maurice Neely was released from prison, stepping into the life Kanisha had worked so hard to prepare for him. For Kanisha, it was a day filled with hope, a long-awaited moment when their family could finally begin anew. But the man who walked out of those gates wasn't the one Kanisha thought she knew. Prison had left its mark on Sheldon in ways she wasn't prepared for, and the transition to normal life brought challenges neither of them anticipated. At first, the cracks were subtle, little moments of frustration, disagreements over small things. Sheldon, accustomed to the rigid structure of prison life, struggled to adapt to the freedoms and responsibilities of the outside world. Kanisha, ever patient, tried to ease his transition, but the strain on their relationship began to grow. Financial stress became a frequent source of tension. Sheldon's struggles to find steady work after his release only heightened his frustration. Kanisha shouldered the burden of supporting their family, her optimism slowly giving way to exhaustion. The arguments, once occasional, became more frequent and more heated. Sheldon's temper flared at the slightest provocation, and Kanisha found herself walking on eggshells, trying to avoid setting him off. But one night, things took a terrifying turn. In one chilling incident, Sheldon's anger erupted into violence. What began as a heated argument quickly spiraled out of control, leaving Kanisha with no choice but to defend herself. Grabbing a firearm she kept for protection, she fired a warning shot, forcing Sheldon to back down. The police arrived quickly, arresting Sheldon and filing charges for assault. For many, this would have been the breaking point, a clear sign that the relationship had become too dangerous to continue. But for Kanisha, it was just another obstacle to overcome. Kanisha, driven by her belief in redemption, dropped the charges. She convinced herself it was a one-time mistake, an outburst caused by stress and frustration. But those closest to her began to see the danger she was in. On social media, Kanisha painted a picture of resilience and love, determined to show the world that they were a strong, united family. But behind closed doors, the reality was far different. Sheldon's behavior grew increasingly erratic. Moments of tenderness were overshadowed by bouts of anger and paranoia. The man Kanisha had fought so hard to save was slipping further away, and with him her hope for the future. Her friends and family pleaded with her to leave, to think of her safety and the well-being of her daughters. But Kanisha, ever the optimist, clung to the belief that Sheldon could still change. For a brief time, things seemed to settle. Sheldon found part-time work, and their arguments grew less frequent. Kanisha allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were turning a corner. Maybe. But beneath the surface, the cracks were still there, waiting for the slightest pressure to break everything apart. Kanisha dismissed the warning signs, attributing them to stress and frustration, but those around her could see the truth, that the love she had fought so hard to protect was slowly turning into a dangerous illusion. How many chances should love be given before it becomes a dangerous gamble? And at what point does hope blind us to the truth we don't want to see? August 4th, 2024 began like any other day. The Neely household was quiet, the air filled with the sounds of children playing and the smell of breakfast cooking. For Kanisha, it seemed like another small step toward rebuilding their fragile peace. But beneath the surface, tensions still simmered. The cracks that had been growing in their relationship were far from healed, and the peace they had managed to maintain was as fragile as glass. By the afternoon, Sheldon's mood had shifted. A text message broke the calm, its tone sharp and insistent. Kanisha knew what that meant. Another argument was brewing. Sheldon's frustrations had been building for weeks. Struggling to adapt to life outside prison and overwhelmed by his own insecurities, His anger found its way to the surface once more, and this time, it was aimed squarely at Kanisha. By evening, the tension was palpable. Kanisha, ever hopeful, tried to diffuse it, but Sheldon's silence spoke volumes. Something was different this time. His anger carried an edge that Kanisha hadn't seen before. The argument began like so many others, over something small, something insignificant. But it quickly spiraled out of control. Sheldon's words became sharper, his tone more aggressive. Kanisha, trying to keep the peace, stood her ground. In that moment, Kanisha saw the man she had fought so hard to save, the man she believed in, slip away, replaced by someone she no longer recognized. Neighbors later reported hearing raised voices coming from the Neely home, the argument growing louder with each passing minute. And then, a sound that froze them in their tracks. A single, piercing scream. Moments later, the sound that shattered the stillness, a gunshot. Then, silence. For Kanisha, the nightmare had reached its devastating conclusion. When police arrived, the house was eerily quiet. Officers approached the front door cautiously, their hearts heavy with the weight of what they might find inside. Inside, they found the unthinkable. Kanisha lay lifeless on the bedroom floor, her body riddled with gunshot wounds. Nearby, Sheldon's body was slumped over, the weapon still in his hand. In one violent, tragic act, he had taken her life, and then his own. The scene was one of devastation. A home once filled with the laughter of children, now silent and broken. For Kanisha's daughters, the loss was unimaginable. In a single night, they had been robbed of their mother, their stability, and the future Kanisha had fought so hard to give them. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the small town of Hoffman, leaving friends, family, and neighbors struggling to make sense of what had happened. How could a love story that began with so much hope end in such unimaginable pain? Could Kanisha's tragic fate have been prevented? And at what point should love give way to self-preservation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The morning after the tragedy, the quiet streets of Hoffman, North Carolina, were gripped by an unsettling stillness. The once peaceful neighborhood now stood as the backdrop to a heartbreaking story that had left a community in shock. For many, the question lingered. How could something so horrific happen here? By sunrise, the news of Kanisha's death had spread, sending ripples of grief and disbelief through the small town. Hoffman was a place where everyone knew everyone, or so they thought. Now this close-knit community faced the harsh reality that even in the quietest corners, tragedy can strike. Evening, the people of Hoffman came together to honor Kanisha's memory. Friends, family, and neighbors stood shoulder to shoulder, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of candles. The air was heavy with sorrow, yet filled with an unspoken promise to ensure her story would not be forgotten. Kanisha's life was celebrated through shared stories of her kindness, her unwavering resilience, and her belief in the good within people. But as the night wore on, so too did the questions. Could this have been prevented? Were there signs that had gone unnoticed? Kanisha's story quickly made national headlines, sparking conversations far beyond Hoffman. It became a tragic symbol of the dangers of domestic violence, a stark reminder of the warning signs that often go unheeded. Across social media, her name trended as people expressed their condolences and their outrage. Her story ignited a firestorm of opinions. Some mourned her as a victim of love's cruel betrayal, while others questioned her decisions, sparking heated debates about trust, forgiveness, and the risks of second chances. In the days that followed, Kanisha's death became a rallying cry for change. Advocacy groups and local leaders called for greater awareness, urging the community to recognize the red flags of abusive relationships and to intervene before it's too late. Domestic violence is a silent epidemic, affecting millions each year. Kanisha's tragic end served as a painful reminder of the importance of support systems, both for those at risk and for those who witness the signs but hesitate to act. Of all those affected by this tragedy, none suffered more than Kanisha's daughters. Left orphaned and too young to fully understand what had happened, their lives were forever changed in a single, heartbreaking night. Family members stepped in to care for them, but the void left by their mother's absence was immeasurable. For the people of Hoffman, the tragedy left a lasting scar. It became a sobering reminder of the fragility of life, the dangers of silence, and the importance of protecting those we care about. Kanisha's death was not just a loss for her family, but for an entire community that vowed to do better in her memory. Kanisha's story brought a community together in grief. But will it inspire real change? How can we as individuals, and as a society, step up to protect those at risk and ensure no more lives are lost to the silence of domestic violence? In the wake of Kanisha's death, her 3 daughters faced a heartbreaking reality. Orphaned overnight, they were taken in by relatives who vowed to provide them with the love and stability Kanisha had fought so hard to give. But no amount of care could erase the scars left by that tragic night. The loss of a parent is a wound that never truly heals. For Kanisha's daughters, the memories of their mother's warmth and kindness were now bittersweet reminders of what had been taken from them. Their laughter, once carefree, now carried the weight of grief. In an outpouring of love and solidarity, the community rallied around Kanisha's children. A GoFundMe campaign was launched to ensure they would have access to education, counseling, and the resources they needed to rebuild their lives. Thousands of people contributed, moved by the story of a mother who gave everything for her family. Kanisha's death was more than a personal tragedy. It was a wake-up call. Advocacy groups used her story to shine a light on the silent epidemic of domestic violence, urging communities to break the cycle of abuse and speak up when they see the signs. How do we ensure that Kanisha's story leads to meaningful change? And how can we as individuals support those around us who may be at risk? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Kanisha Miranda Harrison Neely's story is one that leaves us with many emotions. Grief for a life lost too soon, admiration for her strength and love, and a deep sense of urgency to address the silent epidemic of domestic violence. Her legacy serves as both a cautionary tale and a rallying cry for change. Kanisha's life was filled with love, courage, and sacrifice. While her story ended in tragedy, her legacy reminds us that we all have the power to make a difference, to listen, to support, and to protect those around us. Let us honor Kanisha's memory by ensuring her story sparks change. Together, we can create a world where love is a source of safety, not pain. Thank you for watching today's video. If Kanisha's story resonated with you, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful true crime stories. Like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. It helps us bring awareness to these important issues. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay safe and take care.